Hello everyone. I did a vlog week or 2 weeks back on zombification of US economy, and there I used a lot of data from Federal Reserve to show the level of zombification and potential unemployment impact in case this zombification bubble pops in US. In this article, we are going to show that not only this zombification situation is a lot worse, but it's a global phenomena. It's not just limited to United States. It's a global phenomena, and most of the Western economies are highly in debt, and because of that zombification. So let's get started. Global debt reached 200 trillion at the beginning of 2011, while global GDP was 74 trillion beginning of 2011, making the debt to GDP ratio of the global economy 275%. So as you can see here, the 2011 the global GDP was about 74 trillion and the debt was 200 trillion. In the second quarter of 2021, the global debt reached almost 300 trillion, while GDP was 89.95 trillion, and thus making the total global debt to GDP ratio 330%. This is a typo. I did a calculation myself here, and it comes out to around 330% only. So as you can see, the GDP hasn't increased at the same pace as the debt levels around the world. So where does this lead to? It leads to what we call a Minsky movement. And what is a Minsky movement? Let's, before we go there, understand how Minsky articulated income to debt relationship between the companies or in the companies. And based on that income to debt relationship, there are three possible type of companies that exist. First, companies what we call hedge or stable companies. Hedge finance companies can meet all their debt obligations with their cash flow. That is, their inflows exceed their outflows. Such companies are stable. So what does this mean? It means that whatever my company earns via profits is enough to pay the debt I have taken, both principal amount and the interest on it. So I can pay off all the debt using this strategy. And in a normal functioning economy, most of the companies should be in this category. The second type of companies are speculative. Speculative companies can pay the interest on their debt but cannot pay down the principal. They are forced to constantly refinance. These companies are unstable as any minor problem can bankrupt them. So this is the second category, where the whatever profits I earn, I can pay off the debt, but I cannot pay off the principal amount. Or I can pay off the interest on the debt, but I cannot pay the principal debt amount. So they have to constantly get money from other sources to continue their operations, or to even pay off the debt. The third category is Ponzi, and Ponzi companies do not generate income to pay down the principal or pay the interest. They must sell assets or issue debt just to pay the previous interest on the debt. They end up defaulting on the new debt sooner or later. The chances of survival are minimal. So Ponzi, as is obvious, is they cannot pay the interest, they cannot pay the principal amount from their earnings. Either they have to borrow more money to pay the interest, or they have to sell assets to somehow survive. And they usually end up dying, and in reality, in a normal economy, or in a good functioning economy, the number of zombie companies should be minimal. According to Minsky, when things are going well in an economy and income expectations are met, corporations begin to err on the side of optimism and excessively increase their debt. This causes a shift from stable situation in which the hedge companies are the norm to an unstable one in which Ponzi companies are the norm. So what Minsky has said, that when economy is going well, income expectations are good, then corporations get complacent, they increase their debt, and that causes the situation to shift from hedge to Ponzi. Now, in each economy there are corrective mechanisms where once the situations start going abnormal on the Ponzi side, then the corrective mechanism brings it down back to the mean, and potentially on the other side where the amount of debt becomes much lower than it should be in a normal economy. And this corrective mechanism would be something like no easily available credit or money printing or QE from the central banks. If there is a good risk reward assessment happening in an economy, then the situation should never go crazy where once the economy is on that upward trajectory on higher debts, it continues on that trajectory all the way up. So, but because of the cheap available money in last, I would say, since the dot-com bubble, the trajectory has been up for not only US but most of the global economies. An economy is said to be in a Minsky movement if debtors are unable to pay down their debts or unable to pay the interest and the principal upon the situation. And basically what Minsky movement is, that if the Ponzi companies become norm, then you are in a Minsky movement. That's all it is. As you can see from this chart here, in the 90s the number of Ponzi's were less than 4%, and since then this trajectory has been upward only, and now this is around according to this chart around 15% in 2017. So a zombie company is one whose earnings before interest and taxes are less than or equal to its debt service. In simple words, if whatever I'm earning is not enough to pay the interest and the taxes, then I am a Ponzi or a zombie company. And zombie is a wonderful metaphor for such companies because zombie moves and appears to be alive, but it is in fact dead. A zombie company also moves and appears to be alive. It generates activity, employs workers, and produces goods, but in reality is dead. It is almost certain to die given its inability to pay its debt on its own means. So the number of zombie companies has increased exponentially in the United States in recent years, according to Bank of International Settlements report. So yeah, as you can see, the zombie companies have increased, and not only that, the probability of these zombie companies to remain alive or zombified have also increased. So back when before 2000, the chances of zombie companies surviving was around 60%. Now it is almost nearly around 90%, 85%. So probability of remaining in a zombie state has also increased. Why? Because there is a cheap debt available for them to continue moving on, keep themselves alive. Now, as I said earlier, this zombification is happening all around the world. Australia, at one point it was nearly 35%, so 2013 probably. Now it has come down to 28%, or 2017. By the way, these charts are 2017. It wouldn't be surprising if this has gone much higher, and I will show you later why. Well, not why, but kind of an indication toward that. So very, very high. So almost like 1/3 of the economy is zombified in Australia. Belgium less than 10%, Canada about 35%, China around 7%, Germany over 10%, Denmark 15%, Spain around 15%, France 16%, Britain 22%, maybe 23%, IT, I don't know what the hell is IT, Ireland probably around 12-13%. Japan is a big anomaly. I'm not sure why it's saying it's less than 3%, because Japanese economy is zombified for a very long time and been in a zombie state for about 2-3 decades, since 80s. Not sure why the total number of companies that are zombie is around 3%. But anyway, moving on, Netherlands around 10%, Switzerland about 12-13%, and US, according to this chart, is about 16-17%. By the way, these are 2017 numbers, and you will see now the situation is much worse. So COVID now, the sickness has accelerated the zombification, in fact. So as you can see from this chart, the zombified quarter percentile, 25th percentile, have been zombified for a long time. So since 2017 they are in a zombie state, and since from when the sickness started, their situation has deteriorated. Other companies are in a state where they are financially sustainable, and at 1 ratio of 1, interest coverage ratio of 1, the company is above 1 is financially sustainable, below 1 is financially unsustainable. So yeah, even more revealing is the interest coverage ratio of companies in the first quartile, that is 25% of the companies in the lowest ratio. This indicator has been below 1 since 2012, and that's a good point that proves that these zombie companies can last in zombie state for a very long time. They keep on just borrowing money or rolling the their debts to just live on. In other words, the zombification has accelerated since then. The interest coverage ratio for companies in 25th percentile reached almost zero just before the pandemic. So above zero, so below 1 is unsustainable, but above zero companies still make some profits. It's not enough to pay the interest on the debt. Forget about the principal, but it's not enough to pay the interest on the debt. But there is some profit. But at zero there are no profits, and below zero you are in loss. So you are not only you are not generating any income anymore, you have to, how are you going to pay the interest and the principal amount on the debt? There is no possible way. And around -1, the total losses are of the same size that you need to finance your debt. In other words, the opposite of this +1. So at +1 you have enough income to pay off the interest on your debt, but at -1 you are losing the money that is enough to pay the interest on the debt. So you are, I mean, you are in a almost disaster situation. And the key is at least 25% of the US companies are financially dead, because this is what this chart indicates. So that's 25th percentile, and it has gotten much worse. I would go as far as to say that the chart above also indicates that as soon as crisis hits, the situation of these other companies gets bad as well. So while their interest coverage ratio was 3 before, it went down to near about 2 because of a crisis situation. And if the crisis lasts for a longer time, these companies will also become unsustainable. At least some of them. I'm not saying all of them, but some of them. And that's what the zombification does, this easy availability to cheap money. Now, extrapolating the same thing what I did with the US, I mean in my previous video, and this is also US by the way, if 25% are zombified, and if, let's assume for a second, the total employment in US is 150 million, so which is roughly about right. So around 150 million people are employed in US. If 25% of those people are employed with these zombie companies, which is fair assumption, then in case of interest rate increasing, which Federal Reserve has starting to do, the sustainability of these zombie companies will become very difficult, especially when the Federal Reserve start quantitative tightening as well. So as the balance sheet reduces, that means less liquidity in the economy, less availability of money to service the debts. Interest rate increasing also means your debt servicing it becomes very difficult. Then the bubble around zombification will pop, and that would lead to the ultimate crisis or unemployment crisis. So 25% of people employed with these companies would mean that 37.5 million people can potentially be impacted by a crisis situation. That's a huge number. And it doesn't stop there. The size of these zombie companies has also gotten huge. So in 2019, it was close to $2 trillion in total value. Now they are 6 trillion in 2020, which has probably gotten worse in 2022. So yeah, this is really crazy numbers. I mean, it's insanity. And the bottom line is, if Federal Reserve or all these central banks start increasing interest rates, it will be difficult for these zombie companies to sustain themselves. There will be job cut downs that may lead to unemployment crisis. It will be a depression for sure, but the likely scenario is that when that recession/depression situation happens, a lot of people will suffer, but there will be pressure on these central banks to again do the quantitative easing or money printing, and that, my friends, would be the ultimate outcome of this whole debt debacle, which will be the final road to the hyperinflation. So yeah, and it doesn't I mean, this was really interesting. It's all across the board. Some countries it's a lot worse. So yeah, invest safely and wisely, and try to not have any debts. Invest in alternate asset classes, and make sure your situation is not like a zombified economy situation. I mean, at personal level, a zombification is also possible through excessive debt. For example, housing bubble is an example for that. Personally, the housing debt, versus their housing debt are very high versus their historical incomes, individual incomes. In some cases, people have borrowed it in a ratio of 1:10, when in other words, the house price is 10 times their income. And if for some reason those individuals, let's say, they are not able to service that debt, because of loss of their jobs and stuff, their situation becomes like a zombified economy as well. So yeah, those are the thoughts. Hope this gives a better picture on how bad the situation is, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.